The October morning in Manhattan carried a honeyed kind of light. Sunlight slipped through the tall glass windows of Street Jude Hospital, spilling across the rows of seats in the waiting area, where every sound seemed filtered through the transparent calm of solemnity and hope. Dressed in spotless white, Evelyn Hart walked down the 12th floor corridor in shoes so soft that each step was merely a whisper. In her hands was a vase of white lilies, her small morning ritual, changing the flowers in each patient's room. To her, flowers were part of healing. Medicine could save the body, but beauty, kindness, and human warmth were what truly saved the soul. Bringing flowers again came the voice of Nurse Helen Grant from behind her, aged, yet still warm like a cup of cocoa on a winter day. Evelyn turned, smiling. Yes, hospitals need things that make people believe they'll get better, not just prescriptions. Helen sighed, looking at the young nurse with an affection laced with worry. You're too good, Evelyn. So good it scares me. In this place, kindness can get hurt easily. Evelyn only smiled quietly, softening every warning into something like a passing breeze. We can't stop doing what's right, just because we're afraid of getting hurt, can we? Helen shook her head with a gentle smile and walked away. Evelyn continued down the hall until she reached the last room, 1209, which had just received a new patient. She read the chart. Logan Pierce, 36, helicopter accident trauma. Condition stable but requires continuous monitoring. The name made her frown slightly. She'd heard it, of course. Logan Pierce, the man the media called the King of Wall Street, whose every deal seemed to turn to gold. A man known for power, wealth, and a chill so ruthless it felt like steel. She never imagined he would be here frail, surrounded by tubes and monitors. The door opened with a faint creak. The room was bright and sterile, yet the air was heavy, almost hard to breathe. 4 men in black suits stood around the bed, their eyes sharp with the alertness of royal guards. "Excuse me," Evelyn said softly. "I'm the nurse for this morning shift. I need to check and replace the IV." No one answered. They only exchanged glances before turning toward the man on the bed, Logan Pierce. Even half-conscious, he emanated a kind of power that made the air seem colder. Evelyn placed the vase on the bedside table and began checking the equipment. Every movement was gentle, deliberate. As she adjusted the IV line, her eyes briefly lingered on his face, the face of the man who had once made the entire financial world tremble. But here, under hospital lights, he was no longer untouchable, just a weary, solitary man carrying cracks in his pride. "Who are you?" His voice came low and hoarse, but clear enough to startle her. She turned, meeting his ice-gray eyes now open and fixed on her. Even if it is weakened, that gaze could make most people flinch. "I'm Evelyn Hart, your attending nurse," she replied evenly. "You should stay still. The surgery last night still affects your system." He frowned. "I need to make a call. I have to speak with my assistant. There's an issue with the board." "No," she said, quiet, but firm. "You need to rest." He raised his head, as if in disbelief that someone had dared to tell him no. "Do you know who I am?" Evelyn gave a slight shrug. "You're my patient, and right now, that's the only thing that matters." A flicker of surprise crossed Logan's eyes. He was silent momentarily, then leaned back against the pillow, his lips curling slightly, half amused, half intrigued. "No one's ever spoken to me like that. You're brave, Miss Hart." "It's not bravery," she said, "just doing my job." Morning light glinted off the window, reflecting in Evelyn's warm brown eyes. In a world of power and cold ambition, her voice was like the scent of fresh flowers, not strong, but impossible to ignore. 3 days later, everyone on the 12th floor had noticed something unusual. The demanding billionaire Logan Pierce no longer snapped at anyone. He was still proud, still difficult, but whenever Evelyn entered the room, an unexpected calm settled in. One afternoon, as sunlight poured gold through the window, Evelyn walked in with a vase of fresh roses. Logan was staring outside, his face touched by pale light. "What kind of flowers do you like?" she asked, her voice soft as air. He glanced at her, frowning slightly. "Flowers are useless. I'm not the kind of man who needs decorations." "They're not for you," she replied with a small smile. "They're for the room. Even the place you lie in deserves a bit of life." He studied her, trying to decide whether she was teasing or sincere. But Evelyn just focused on arranging the flowers, saying nothing more. When she was about to leave, he spoke again. "Why do you do this job?" "You mean caring for others?" "Yes, taking care of people. Seems like a waste of time." Evelyn laughed softly, a sound that barely touched the air. "It's not. I once thought that the world would be less cold if everyone gave a little more kindness." Logan fell silent. Her words, simple as they were, stirred something buried deep in him, perhaps his childhood, or the part of himself that existed before power turned him into a machine. "I read somewhere," Evelyn continued, "that healing isn't only in medicine, it's in being seen, heard, believed to be still human." Sunlight caught her face, warming the amber tones in her eyes. Logan turned away, avoiding the strange ache spreading in his chest. That evening, he gave no orders for the first time since admission. He lay still, watching the roses tremble lightly in the breeze, and wondered if she knew that somehow she was reminding him what it felt like to care. Day by day, she became the rhythm of that room. When she smiled, the light seemed to follow. When she left, the air felt oddly empty. He began to measure time by her footsteps: morning, when she changed the flowers; afternoon, when she wrote her notes; night, when she wished him, "Good night, Mr. Pierce." One night, just as she was about to leave, he said, "Evelyn." She turned. "You spoke about human dignity. Do you really believe in that?" She nodded softly. "I believe everyone carries wounds that others can't see. And I believe that no matter who you are, or how much money you have, what you need is the same as any patient: someone who listens." Logan smiled, but there was sadness in it. "No one's spoken to me like that in a long time. Maybe because you've never let them." Their eyes met. The room was so quiet that they could hear their hearts beating for a few seconds. In that sterile world of metal and machines, two seemingly opposite souls found something they shared: a loneliness too well hidden. As Evelyn walked toward the door, she heard him murmur behind her, "Thank you for seeing me." She paused at the threshold, not turning back, just smiling. "You know, Mr. Pierce, that's only the beginning. The hardest part is learning to see yourself." The door closed softly, leaving him alone beneath the white hospital lights. For the first time in his life, Logan Pierce wasn't afraid of silence. He feared only one thing: that when she left, the light had gone with her. Outside, the New York night glittered endlessly, a city that never slept, and yet, in that quiet room, a man finally learned what peace could feel like. Winter moved slowly through the streets of Manhattan. Snow fell in a steady rhythm, like the city's breathing, covering rooftops and sidewalks with a soft white calm. In the midst of the cold, Jude Hospital remained a place where the light never went out, and on its 12th floor, what once was only a bond between nurse and patient had quietly become something more. After nearly 2 months of treatment, Logan could walk on his own. Yet he hadn't left the hospital, not for medical reasons, but because he wasn't ready to leave the place where every morning began with her gentle voice. Each morning, Evelyn still changed the flowers. Each afternoon, she still checked his wound, asking softly if it hurt, if he'd eaten enough. And every night, she still said, "Sleep well, Mr. Pierce." Only now, he was no longer a patient. He was a man learning how to love. One late February afternoon, he asked her, "If I'm discharged tomorrow, will you still come?" She laughed. "You won't be my patient anymore." "Why would I?" "Maybe. To have coffee?" The question made Evelyn look up, surprised and slightly flustered. She meant to refuse, but something in his eyes, gentle, sincere, strangely vulnerable, left her speechless. And so, the next day, she came, not in her white uniform, but in a cream sweater and a brown scarf. They met at a small cafe near Central Park. Logan was no longer the man on a hospital bed, but a different version of himself: simpler, warmer, quieter, with eyes that said more than he spoke. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low and steady. Evelyn glanced out the window, where the snow had melted into small droplets on the glass. "I only have an hour for lunch." "That's enough." He told her about the helicopter crash, about the emptiness he felt waking up in a hospital room with no one by his side. "In that moment, I thought, Maybe I had no one left. Evelyn looked at him and said softly, "No one is ever truly alone, Logan. Sometimes we forget how to open ourselves to the world." Her words, so simple, silenced him for a long time. He touched the coffee cup lightly, feeling the warmth seep into his fingers. A warmth he hadn't felt in years. From that day, he began calling her. At first, just short messages of thanks. Then, the questions meant nothing, except that he wanted to hear her voice. And when he invited her to the Pierce Group's charity gala, she refused 3 times, only to accept on the 4th, because Helen had nudged her and smiled. Sometimes, you have to let life take you somewhere. Evelyn stepped into the grand ballroom in a simple navy dress that night. The chandeliers glimmered above her, turning her into a quiet point of light amid a sea of glittering gowns. Logan saw her from across the room, and his heartbeat slowed. It felt like watching a breath of wind move through glass towers. "You came," he said, extending his hand. Evelyn looked around, uneasy among the strangers, but his hand was warm enough to steady her. All night, they talked, laughed, fell silent, and when the final jazz song began, Logan asked, "Do you believe in destiny?" "No," she replied. "I believe in choice." "Then do you believe that sometimes our choices are what destiny intended all along?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Maybe I'll believe it if you can prove it." Logan didn't answer. He looked at her, as though something in her eyes made him want to become a better man, someone she could believe in. A week later, in the rose garden of his Upper East Side penthouse, he knelt with a diamond ring. "Evelyn Hart," he said softly, "I once had everything, but I never knew peace until I met you." Evelyn stood still. The night breeze carried the scent of roses and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic. She had never imagined herself in such a moment, standing before a man once untouchable on magazine covers, now looking at her with a sincerity too absolute to deny. "Will you marry me?" The question echoed in her mind for a long time. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She placed a hand over her heart, where it beat fast beneath her fingers. After a few seconds, she smiled and nodded gently. The wind rose, scattering petals into the air. The reflection of city lights shimmered in Logan's eyes as he held her hand tight, as if letting go would make her disappear. "I'll make you happy," he promised, and Evelyn believed him. Because then, she didn't yet know that promises are the most fragile things in the world. Their wedding took place a month later, on a misty April morning. The old street, Andrew's Church on 74th Street, glowed with hundreds of candles. The press called it the wedding of the century, where one of New York's most powerful financiers married an ordinary nurse. But as Evelyn walked down the aisle, no one saw her as ordinary. The simple white gown, the calm, luminous eyes, she looked like the dawn itself. Logan waited at the end of the aisle, dressed in black, his eyes never leaving hers. When her hand met his, he whispered, "You're so beautiful. I forgot how to breathe." Evelyn laughed softly, then answered with a trembling voice, "I love the man you're becoming, not the name you carry." Her vow made him shiver. Outside, light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting their faces in violet and gold. When the priest spoke the final blessing, he held her hand tighter and murmured, "I'll never forget why you love me." The bells rang, flowers filled the air, and cameras flashed endlessly. Logan and Evelyn left the church amid cheers and music. He looked at her and smiled. "From now on, nothing can ever hurt you, I promise." His words drifted away into the air, lost among laughter and celebration. Their honeymoon was on the Amalfi Coast, Italy, winding coastal roads, white houses against blue skies, and waves that sang through the night. Evelyn thought that if happiness had a shape, it must look exactly like those days. Every morning, she woke to find Logan reading on the balcony. She brought him coffee and rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said, "I used to think love was just something people talked about in movies. And now I think, if it is a movie, I hope it never reaches the ending." Logan smiled and kissed her forehead. "There are no endings, only new chapters." And that new chapter, Evelyn never expected, would be written differently in lines of doubt, silence, and the quiet absence of the man she loved most. One evening in Amalfi, just before sunset, Evelyn touched her stomach, feeling something unfamiliar. She sat up and called softly, "Logan, I think I might be pregnant." He froze, then smiled a rare, tender smile. He held her close and whispered, "You just gave me something I never thought I deserved." They watched the sun sink into the sea, peace filling their hearts. But in that very moment, beneath the blazing orange sky of Italy, Evelyn caught something in his eyes, a flicker of fear, a distance she couldn't name. She held his hand tight and asked quietly, "Are you happy?" He smiled, though something in that smile didn't feel real. "I am," he said. "I just don't know how to be." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, thinking that perhaps happiness was something one had to learn to accept. She didn't know that those serene days were the final breaths of a dream before the storm. Outside, the sun disappeared completely, leaving a sky deep and violet. And in that fading light, a breeze from the sea blew through, quietly extinguishing the candle on the table. After the honeymoon, summer returned to New York. The city was as alive as ever, thick with the hum of traffic and the neon pulse of billboards that never slept. Yet inside the penthouse on the 40th floor of Logan Pierce's building, the air felt different, too still, too pristine, like a place built to be admired, not lived in. Evelyn grew used to her new rhythm, waking early to make coffee, reading the news, waiting for Logan to leave before heading to her prenatal classes. Every afternoon, she walked around the nearby park, her hand resting gently on her belly where a small life was quietly growing. She wrote in her journal each night. The entries were brief, delicate, but full of tender hope. "Sweetheart, today I heard your heartbeat. It sounded like a miracle. Your father's so busy, but I know he'll love you as much as I love him." But as the weeks went on, the pages filled with more space. Dinners for one, messages unanswered, promises lost somewhere between back-to-back meetings and late-night calls. Logan was busy, always busy. Evelyn understood. She had fallen in love with a man who never stopped working, who believed the world might collapse if he paused for even a second. But she didn't realize that he was losing hers while he was saving his world. One evening, as she cleared the dinner table, the phone rang. "It's me," his voice came, low and tired. "Are you coming home soon? I made your favorite pasta. I've got dinner with the board. Don't wait up." "Again?" His tone cooled. "You know how my job is." Evelyn went quiet. Through the line came the sound of clinking glasses, distant music, and then laughter. A woman's laughter. "Where are you, Logan?" "Le Mirage." "Why? Is something wrong?" "No. I miss you." Silence filled the line. "I'll call you later," he said and hung up. The apartment fell quiet again. Evelyn sat down, staring at the still warm plates on the table, watching the steam fade like the last trace of hope in her chest. Her old colleague, Helen Grant, called at that moment. "Evelyn, how are you? I miss the way you used to change flowers for every patient." Evelyn gave a small laugh. "Now I just changed the ones in our apartment. And him? Busy as always." Helen hesitated, then said softly, "People with too much money often forget how to listen. Just don't let that make you forget yourself." After the call, Evelyn stepped out onto the balcony. Manhattan at night was dazzling but distant. From above, the lights of 1,000,000 apartments looked like small stars, each one a life, a story, a kind of loneliness. She whispered, "Maybe I'm just another star in his sky." She didn't know that, across the city, Logan was sitting in a high-end restaurant opposite a woman named Vanessa Caldwell, his newly hired head of communications. Vanessa was the type of woman Logan had always been drawn to. Sharp, magnetic, able to make him feel irreplaceable. When she laughed, he laughed. He didn't pull away when she brushed his hand to emphasize a story. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling, and in Logan's eyes, the image of his pregnant wife blurred, replaced by the bold, knowing gaze of a woman who made him forget who he was supposed to be. The following month, Logan came home less often. When he did, unfamiliar perfume lingered on his suits, and his eyes no longer remained on Evelyn. One night, she woke to a light tightening in her belly. The room glowed faintly from the digital clock. Logan wasn't home. She called, no answer. She left a message. "Logan, I'm a little scared. The baby's kicking so much. I wish you were here." The message was sent, but no reply came. He returned the next morning. His shirt was wrinkled, and the cuffs carried that same expensive scent. Evelyn didn't ask. She just looked at him for a long moment before saying quietly, "I don't need you to apologize. I need you to be here." Logan didn't answer. He sat down, his gaze falling on her hand resting over her belly, then exhaled. "I'm tired, Evelyn. Don't make me choose." "I'm not asking you to choose," she said, trembling. "I just want to be loved the way I was initially." He stayed silent, and in that silence, Evelyn knew some part of him had already left. In the following days, she tried harder, cooking dinners, preparing the baby's room, leaving little notes around the house for him to find. "I love you. Your daughter misses you." But the papers only fluttered in the air-conditioning breeze, never reaching the heart they were meant for. One afternoon, her sister Emily came to visit. Seeing the exhaustion in Evelyn's eyes, she asked, "Are you sure he deserves you?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "People don't love because someone deserves it, sis. They love because their hearts don't know any other way." Emily took her hand. "But even a heart needs protection, Evelyn." That evening, after Emily left, Evelyn sat alone, staring at their wedding photo on the wall. Logan's eyes in the picture still held that same promise from the night he proposed. She whispered, as if speaking to a memory, "Maybe love is like photographs, Logan. It keeps the image, but not the feeling." That night, Logan didn't come home, and for the first time, Evelyn didn't call. She bathed, put on her nightgown, and lay down. Her hand rested on her belly, where the baby kicked gently as if offering comfort. "Don't worry, Lila. Wherever your father is, I'm here. I'll love you enough for both of us." A tear slipped down her cheek, staining the pillow like fading ink. Outside, the city was still bright, loud, and indifferent to the quiet breaking of a heart 40 floors above. When Logan finally returned, just before dawn, he walked softly into the room. Evelyn was asleep, her face calm, her hand resting protectively on her belly. He stood momentarily, bent down, and brushed his fingers against her hand. A sharp ache ran through him. He wanted to say "I'm sorry," but he couldn't, because deep down, he knew he had gone too far. He turned away, leaving behind the trace of a stranger's perfume in the room where morning was about to break. And that was the last night Evelyn believed love could heal everything. An October night, rain drummed endlessly on the rooftops of Manhattan's high-rises. The city shimmered in the puddles like a painting stretched too far, blurred, distorted, dissolving. In the penthouse on 82nd Street, a dim light spilled from the bedroom window. Evelyn woke to a sharp, tearing pain. She glanced at the clock. 12:40, 3 a.m. At first, she thought it was another false contraction, like the ones from the past weeks. But then came another wave, stronger, longer, and she knew it was time. She reached for her phone. Logan's name was the first on her contact list. She called. 1 ring, 2, 3, then voicemail. "Logan, it's me, I think. I'm in labor. Please, come home. I need you." She set the phone down and waited. The rain lashed against the window, steady, relentless, like a racing heartbeat. 10 minutes later, the next contraction hit. Sweat broke across her skin. She tried to breathe the way her prenatal instructor had taught, but her breaths came ragged. She called again, still voicemail. The third time, her voice broke. "Do you hear me, Logan? It's our baby. I'm scared. Please." No answer. Gripping the wall for support, she forced herself upright. Each step toward the door felt endless. The pain twisted through her like fire. Her knees buckled once, and she whispered through clenched teeth, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just you and me. We'll be fine." She grabbed a coat, her hospital bag, and called for a cab. Her voice trembled as she gave the address. The driver, an older Italian man, looked at her through the mirror. "Mom, should I call an ambulance?" "No, just drive. As fast as you can." Her face was pale in the reflection, but her eyes burned bright. The quiet fire of a woman determined to endure. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just bit her lip and held her breath steady. By the time they reached Street Jude Hospital, she could barely stand. The staff rushed out with a stretcher. "Where's your husband?" a nurse asked. "He's busy," she answered between gasps. In the blinding white of the delivery room, Evelyn heard the steady beeping of the fetal monitor. Dr. Martinez, once her instructor in nursing school, entered, eyes widening in recognition. "Evelyn? Oh my God, you're in labor. Why are you alone?" "I'm fine, doctor. I need someone to help me bring her into the world." "All right, we've got you. You're doing great." Outside, the rain kept falling. The monitor beeped rhythmically, and the nurses moved swiftly, the strange, sacred cadence of life and pain intertwined. During the final contraction, Evelyn cried out not from fear, but from the realization that what she had dreaded most had come true. Logan wasn't coming. And then, a cry came through the storm of pain, sharp, clear, and alive. "Congratulations," Dr. Martinez smiled. "A healthy baby girl." Evelyn gasped for breath, tears mixing with sweat. When they laid the baby on her chest, all other sounds vanished. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "You're my miracle. Maybe the reason I have to keep living." The baby opened her eyes, dark, deep as the night sky, and stared straight at her. Evelyn smiled. "You have your father's eyes." A mother was born with her child in that small room beneath the rain and sterile light. Morning came over a misty New York skyline. Inside Street Jude Hospital, sunlight filtered through white curtains, touching Evelyn Hart's tired but radiant face. The baby lay quietly in her arms. All the fear of the night before had faded, leaving only a warmth, that raw, unconditional love that exists before words. The door opened, a familiar voice. "Evelyn." She looked up. Logan stood there in a dark suit, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. She didn't speak. He stepped closer, stopping beside the bed. I'm late." "Yes," she said evenly. "You are." He looked at the baby, lost. "She looks like you." "No, she has your eyes," Evelyn replied softly, brushing her daughter's forehead. "But I'll teach her to see the world differently than you do." He fell silent. The monitor beeped steadily, a reminder that new life had begun in that room and something else had quietly died. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. Don't apologize, Logan," she interrupted gently. "Apologies only matter when people stop hurting each other." She looked at him for a long moment before continuing, her voice calm but resolute. "Last night, when I called and you didn't answer, I understood. I still live in your heart, not the part that matters first anymore. And maybe the only thing I can do now is let go." He clenched his fists, searching for words, but her eyes said everything. There was no anger in them, no hate, only the quiet fatigue of someone who had loved completely. "What did you name her?" he asked softly. "Grace." He repeated it under his breath. "Grace. It means blessing," she said, "because even when everything falls apart, God still gave me her." Logan lowered his head. For the first time, the man who had held billions in his hands felt smaller than the space between them, unworthy to touch what truly mattered. After he left, Evelyn sat by the window. The sky was gray, but sunlight began to break through the clouds. Dr. Martinez came in, smiling gently. "How are you feeling, Evelyn?" "I'm okay," she said, looking down at the baby. "I found my reason to stand again." The doctor nodded. He understood some women, when abandoned, don't collapse. They're reborn stronger, deeper, quieter. That afternoon, Evelyn wrote in her journal, "The day you came to me, my love, I lost something but gained something far greater. You are grace, blessing, light, and forgiveness. We won't need anyone else to make us whole." She closed the notebook and placed it beside her daughter's tiny bracelet. Sunset streamed through the window, painting both their faces, one weary, one new in soft gold. Both turned toward what lay ahead. Outside, the rain had stopped, and in room 207 of Street Jude Hospital, a new life began without the man who once promised her the world, but with a woman who had learned to build her own. 2 days after giving birth, Evelyn Hart was moved to the recovery ward. She was still weak, but the tiny baby in her arms slept peacefully, as if the world itself had hushed to make room for her, breathing soft, steady, serene. That morning, the sky was clear and free of sunlight. A thin beam slipped through the curtain, brushing across Evelyn's tousled hair, turning it golden. She opened her eyes, looked at her daughter, and whispered with a tired smile, "We'll be all right, Lila." The door opened. A woman's voice, high, light, cold. "So you're really here?" Evelyn turned her head. She recognized the woman instantly, though they had never met in person. Vanessa Caldwell. Vanessa's heels clicked sharply on the tile floor, each step slicing through the quiet. Her dark red dress, perfectly curled hair, flawless makeup, everything about her radiated the confidence of someone who knew her power. "Excuse me, who allowed you in here?" Evelyn asked, her voice small but calm. Vanessa smiled faintly. "I don't need anyone's permission. I just wanted to meet the woman Logan once called his light." Evelyn said nothing, only held Lila closer to her chest. "Adorable," Vanessa said, glancing at the baby. "But you know, Logan never planned to come here. He was with me the night you gave birth." Evelyn stayed silent. Only her breath trembled slightly. Vanessa leaned closer, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "He told me this marriage was a mistake, that he married you out of pity. And you know what's funny?" She gave a small, icy laugh. "Even when you were giving birth, he said he didn't want to be there. Because that baby," she gestured toward Lila, "is nothing but a chain he never wanted." Evelyn felt something twist deep in her chest, but her face remained remarkably calm. "Are you finished?" Vanessa blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Because if you are," Evelyn continued softly, "you should go. This is a hospital room, not a stage for your victory." Vanessa scoffed. "Victory? How naive. I just wanted you to know your place." Evelyn bent down, kissed her daughter's forehead, then lifted her gaze again. Her voice was quiet, but each word cut like ice. "No, Miss Caldwell, I know my place. You don't. Because the woman who needs to stand beside Logan to make him feel less miserable, that's not me. That's you." For a moment, Vanessa froze. In Evelyn's tired eyes, she saw something she had never possessed: dignity. Evelyn turned away and said gently, "Please leave. I don't want my daughter to hear another word from someone who's forgotten what love means." Vanessa stood still, her lips trembling, before forcing a thin smile. "Fine, think what you want. But remember, Logan belongs to me now." Evelyn didn't respond. She began humming a lullaby. The fragile tune filled the air, making Vanessa feel inexplicably small. She turned on her heel, and the door closed behind her. Silence returned. Evelyn looked down at her child and whispered, "Listen, Lila, you just met the first lesson I want you to learn. No one can make you feel small unless you let them." Her voice was hoarse, but steady. For the first time, Evelyn Hart felt strong. That afternoon, when the sunlight softened, the door opened again. A man entered, wearing a white coat and a gentle smile. "Dr. Nathan Cole." "I heard the nurses talking," he said lightly. "A birth like something out of a fairy tale, but without the prince. I had to see the brave mother behind it." Evelyn looked up. She remembered him, the assisting doctor on the night she delivered. His smile carried a kind of quiet warmth, neither invasive nor pitying. "Hello, Dr. Cole," she said, trying to sit up. "Don't," he said gently, touching her shoulder. "You've done enough for one lifetime." He looked at the baby in her arms and smiled. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Lila." "Lila," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "It means night, doesn't it? A new beginning." Evelyn nodded. "Also, because the night she came, the sky was purple and rained." Nathan studied her quietly. In his eyes, there was no professional curiosity, only understanding. "Do you have anyone to help you?" Evelyn shook her head. "Not yet, but I'll be fine." He paused for a moment, then said, "People think a woman's strength is how much she can endure, but I think real strength lies in how she loves even after she's broken." Evelyn looked up, startled by his words. Nathan smiled softly. "I see that in you, and I believe you won't let this child grow up in darkness." She smiled faintly. "You believe in me too easily." "No," he said, voice low. "I believe because I've seen it. That night, through the pain, you never screamed or cursed. You just held the nurse's hand and said, "We can do this." A person like that is worth believing in. Evelyn lowered her head, hiding the tear that slipped down her cheek. "Thank you, Dr. Cole." He stood. "I'm only doing my job. But I'm on the 6th floor if you ever need to talk. My door's always open." He left quietly, the faint scent of his cologne lingering, and with it, something new inside her, like a small candle lit in a dark room. That night, Evelyn sat by the window and wrote in her journal, "Today, someone told me I'm strong. Maybe he doesn't know I'm just trying not to fall apart. But perhaps that's what strength really is." She looked down at her daughter and whispered, "Lila, I promise we won't live out of fear anymore. I'll teach you to stand tall, forgive, and never forget. And someday, when you ask about your father, I'll tell you he was once a beautiful part of us, just too fragile to stay." Outside, the rain had stopped. Moonlight streamed through the glass, thin and silver. In that quiet moment, Evelyn knew. The darkest night of her life had passed. And the road ahead, however, uneven, would no longer be one she walked alone. 3 weeks after giving birth, Evelyn Hart packed her things and left the penthouse on the Upper East Side. Logan wasn't there. He was on a business trip, or at least, that's what his assistant's text said. She told no one. Quietly, she gathered what still belonged to her. A few dresses, the wedding photo, a small stuffed bear, and a single glass vase, the only thing she had ever bought for that house herself. The afternoon light had turned soft when the moving truck pulled up on a quiet street in Brooklyn Heights. The air smelled of baked bread and dry maple leaves. Her new apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building, with a small balcony overlooking a park. "Not big," the landlord said, "but bright, and the neighbors are good people." Evelyn smiled. "That's all I need." The apartment was small, the wooden floors worn, but the windows let sunlight pour in. When she placed baby Lila into her new crib, the child laughed her first laugh since birth. Evelyn laughed too, then sat on the floor, looking around the bare room. "Welcome home, Lila," she whispered. That first day, she arranged everything with her still tired hands, one thing at a time. She washed blankets, hung pictures, and fixed the lights. By sunset, the orange glow spilled through the curtains, painting the floor in a warmth she hadn't felt in months. That evening, her sister Emily came over. She wrapped Evelyn in an embrace, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You really did it," walked away from everything. "I don't know if I should feel proud or broken for you." Evelyn smiled faintly, her eyes bright. "It's not walking away, sis. It's taking me back." Emily glanced around the small apartment, then chuckled. "This place has more soul than that penthouse ever did. Because here, everything means something," Evelyn said. "Nothing's for show, everything's for living." The two sisters sat on the floor when night fell, drinking tea and watching Lila sleep. Outside, the distant hum of cars blended with laughter from children in the park. Life sounded simple again, almost like it belonged to another world. Before leaving, Emily squeezed her hand. "Are you really okay?" Evelyn nodded softly. "Not completely, but I'm getting there." After the door closed, only mother and daughter remained. Evelyn sat by the window and wrote in her journal, "Sometimes peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from the absence of fear." Outside, the wind stirred, scattering maple leaves across the balcony. In that small room, beneath a warm yellow light, sat a woman who had lost everything and found the most precious thing of all, herself. A week later, Evelyn returned to Street Jude Hospital not as a patient, but as a nurse. Helen Grant greeted her at the administration office, smiling kindly and familiarly. "I knew you'd come back sooner or later," she said. "You can't stay away from this place, can you?" Evelyn smiled. "I think this place saw me fall. It should see me stand again." Helen nodded. "Welcome home, Evelyn." Her first day back felt both strange and comforting. The sound of heart monitors, the faint smell of disinfectant, the rhythm of footsteps on the floor, everything was the same. Yet she wasn't. She was no longer the trembling girl standing by Logan Pierce's hospital bed. She was Evelyn Hart, the woman who had survived her darkest night. She heard a voice behind her while changing a patient's dressing during her afternoon shift. "Nurse Hart, do you need any assistance with your case?" She turned. It was Dr. Nathan Cole. He looked just as before, white coat, warm eyes, that quiet smile. But this time, there was something different in how he looked at her. Respect. "Hello, Dr. Cole," she said with a soft smile. "I'm fine today, thank you." "You look different," he said, half teasing, "like someone who's walked through a storm and survived," she replied. "No," he said, his voice gentle. "You didn't just survive, you brought back the light." Evelyn chuckled. "You're good with words, doctor. I'm just saying what I see. You know, I've seen many patients fight to live, but very few fight to live well." She went silent, his words touching something deep within her. That evening, after their shift, Nathan walked out with her. "Heading straight home?" he asked. "There's a cafe around the corner, best apple pie in Brooklyn." Evelyn glanced at her watch. "I need to get home to feed my daughter. But a cup of coffee to go sounds perfect." They walked side by side under a canopy of shedding trees. The golden light of dusk stretched across the street. The smell of coffee filled the air. "I used to never talk to anyone from work after hours," Nathan said. "Why's that?" "Because I was afraid I'd start caring too much." Evelyn smiled. "And now?" "Now I think sometimes caring for the right person is worth it." She looked at him, eyes uncertain, touched, cautious. "You don't have to pity me, doctor." He shook his head gently. "I don't. I respect you." They stopped in front of the cafe. He handed her a cup. "For you, with a touch of cinnamon. For the days that need warmth." Evelyn smiled, taking it. "Thank you." Lila was sleeping soundly in her crib when she came home that night. The lamplight glowed over her rosy cheeks. Evelyn set the coffee on the table and stood watching her daughter. "You know, sweetheart," she whispered, "today I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Maybe miracles happen when we stop waiting for someone to save us. Maybe that's when God sends someone not to rescue us, but to remind us we already did." She turned toward the window. The Brooklyn sky held only a few stars, but enough to believe in tomorrow. Evelyn sipped the still warm coffee, and the scent of cinnamon was soft. Then she opened her journal and wrote, "Everyone has a home to return to. Mine is a small apartment, a child, and a faith reborn. I don't know what the future holds, but tonight I feel enough." Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of apple pie. And in that little apartment, where a woman once broke, a new life had truly begun. Late February draped New York in the silvery gray of winter. Melting snow streaked the sidewalks with puddles, and on the towering billboards, Logan Pierce's face still shone, the face of success, the perfect smile, the cool eyes, framed by the gleaming logo of Pierce Group. But if one looked closely, the light in that smile was gone. After a failed merger with an international fund, the headlines began whispering, "The Pierce empire is crumbling." Logan came home less and less, or instead, to the apartment he shared with Vanessa Caldwell. Vanessa now had everything she'd ever wanted: power, prestige, and her name in glossy magazines. But what she didn't have was love. The penthouse had become cold, lifeless, silent dinners, empty wine glasses. Logan sat by the window, watching the city's glow, his eyes weary. "What are you thinking?" Vanessa asked lazily from across the room. "Nothing. It's always nothing with you, because even if I said it, you wouldn't understand." Her face hardened. "You know what, Logan? I'm tired of you acting like the victim of your own life, and I'm tired of you needing to win every argument." Silence fell between them. Then Vanessa gave a sharp, bitter smile. "Don't forget, if it weren't for me, the financial world would have devoured you. I held your image together. I protected you." "By sleeping with a journalist?" he asked, his tone flat. Her slap came fast and clean. The sound cracked through the air. She stood tall, eyes blazing. "Don't test me, Logan. I'm not your Evelyn. I don't cry for you." Logan touched his cheek and gave a faint, bitter laugh that sounded more like defeat than humor. "You're right. You're not her. And that's exactly why I haven't been happy a single day since I left her." Vanessa froze. For a fleeting moment, her expression faltered before she turned away, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. The door slammed, leaving Logan alone in the dim, echoing silence. He poured another glass of wine, staring at his reflection in the window. "You won the world," he murmured, "but lost one person." He drank. The burn hollow. For the first time, Logan Pierce realized that power had no taste, only emptiness that slowly consumed him. Meanwhile, it was a bright February morning across the river in Brooklyn Heights. Evelyn Hart pushed Lila's stroller through the park, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. The air was cold, but her heart felt quietly warm. She'd been back at work for over 3 months. Life was busy, sometimes hard, but filled with small joys. Lila was growing fast, laughing often, and Nathan Cole still showed up from time to time bringing muffins, fixing light bulbs, or simply stopping by with no reason at all. That morning, he appeared at her door holding a small pot of lavender. "This helps you sleep," he said. Evelyn smiled. "Are you saying I look tired?" "No," he chuckled. "I just think every mother deserves a corner of peace." He placed the pot on the windowsill. Sunlight spilled across his face, catching in his eyes, and Evelyn felt something in her chest stir softly. "Do you ever think," she asked, "that the simplest things can make us happiest?" "Of course," Nathan said, "but it usually takes half a lifetime for people to realize it." That afternoon, they went to the hospital together. Nathan had a charity gala to attend, and he wanted her to come. "I'm not used to those events," she hesitated. "That's okay," he said gently. "Just be yourself." The gala was held at the plaza. Evelyn walked in wearing a pale blue dress Helen had given her. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She wore no makeup, yet glowed. When she crossed the marble floor, every head turned, not because of glamour, but because of the serenity she carried. And in that crowd, Logan Pierce saw her. He stood by the bar, a glass of red wine halfway to his lips. He froze. The woman before him wasn't the quiet figure from the penthouse. She was someone new, confident, graceful, radiant in a way he'd never known. Nathan leaned toward her, whispering something that made her laugh, a light, unguarded, pure, and bright laugh. Vanessa, standing beside Logan, followed his gaze and smirked. "Well," she said sharply, "she certainly knows how to pick her moment to shine." Logan said nothing. He looked at Evelyn for one more heartbeat before turning away. But his chest ached not with longing, but with a pain far worse. The knowledge that the woman he'd broken had learned to live without him. Nathan poured Evelyn a glass of wine. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. If you could go back in time, would you change anything?" She paused, thoughtful. "Nothing. Because without the past, I wouldn't understand today's value." Nathan smiled. "Then here's to your past for making the woman I see before me." Evelyn smiled back, their eyes meeting a brief moment, yet enough to blur the world around them. That night, when they returned to her apartment, Lila was asleep in her crib. Nathan lingered by the doorway, ready to leave, until Evelyn said softly, "Would you like to come in for tea?" He looked surprised, then nodded. They sat on the wooden floor, warm light casting soft shadows on the walls. There were no grand words or pretenses, just two people who had known pain and learned to trust gentleness again. "You know," Evelyn said quietly, "I used to think the world was divided into two kinds of people, those who hurt and those who get hurt. But now I know there's a third kind, those who choose to heal." Nathan looked at her, voice low. "You're that third kind, Evelyn." Outside, snow drifted softly past the window. The two sat side by side in the small apartment, silent but at peace. And across the city, Logan Pierce stared out his own window. The city lights flickered across his tired face. Evelyn's old words echoed in his mind. "The hardest part is learning to look at yourself." And for the first time, he was afraid not of losing her, but of realizing she no longer belonged to his pain. April in Central Park was awash with pink. The whole city seemed to soften, petals drifting down on the shoulders of strollers, on lovers laughing beneath the tender spring Sunday. Evelyn Hart strolled along the stone path by the lake, pushing Lila's stroller. She wore a light knit dress, her hair loose, her eyes glowing with a new kind of peace that only comes after a storm has passed. Nathan Cole was waiting near an old wooden bench where they used to sit after long shifts. He wore a white shirt, a cup of coffee in one hand, and a small pot of lavender in the other. "You brought flowers again," she teased. "I thought your apartment could use a bit more spring. I thought cherry blossoms were enough." "No," he smiled. "Cherry blossoms fade in weeks. Lavender lasts longer." They both laughed, two people who had once lost everything, now laughing like laughter was a miracle. They sat together on the bench, quiet, watching the lake mirror the blue sky. Children ran past, their laughter echoing like wind chimes. Lila stirred in her stroller, eyes wide, seeing the world as if for the first time. Nathan leaned down, brushing a finger against her tiny hand. "Hello, little princess." Lila answered with a cheerful babble, making Evelyn chuckle. "She really likes you." "Actually," he said with a grin, "I think she likes us comes as a package deal." A breeze carried the sweet scent of spring through the park. For a moment, everything felt whole. Then Nathan's tone changed low, steady, a little nervous. "Evelyn, there's something I need to tell you." She turned to him, curious. "I never lied to you," he began, "but I did keep part of the truth from you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to see me, not the name I carry." Evelyn frowned slightly. "I was born into the Rooney family," he said. "You might have heard of them. They own the largest network of hospitals and medical foundations in the country." Evelyn blinked, stunned. Then she let out a soft, disbelieving laugh, not mocking, just amazed. "You're saying, you're Timothy Rooney?" "Yes," he admitted. "But I never used that name at Street Jude. I wanted to work like any other doctor to earn what I did. And then, I met you." He paused, his honesty disarming. "I know what you've been through, a man with money, power, and the ability to wound without even realizing it. I was afraid that if you knew, you'd walk away before I could show you I'm not like him." Evelyn stayed silent for a long time. A gust of wind lifted a handful of cherry petals, one landing softly in her palm. "You think I loved you because you were ordinary?" she asked, quiet but sharp. "No," Nathan said quickly. "I just wanted you to love me for what's real." "What's real," she said gently, "isn't built on secrets, Nathan." He bowed his head. "You have every right to be angry. I'll accept that. But I can't keep hiding when I love you more daily." Her breath caught. "What did you just say?" "I love you, Evelyn, not out of pity or perfection. I love the calm in you, the way you hold your daughter when you're scared, the way you still smile even after your heart was broken. I love you because you dare to live honestly." A soft breeze lifted the branches, and petals rained around them, a gentle storm of pink. Nathan knelt, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple diamond ring, gleaming like a drop of morning dew. "I don't want to change your life," he said. "I just want to walk beside you. You and Lila are the best things I've ever known. Evelyn Hart, will you honor me to stand with you both?" Evelyn brought her hand to her mouth, eyes brimming, not with sorrow but with that quiet, undeniable knowing when the heart recognizes home. "You know," she whispered, "I thought I'd never believe in promises again. But if it's you, I do." Nathan looked up, his eyes bright in the sunlight. "So, that means?" "That means yes," she said softly. "I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Cherry blossoms swirled around them like a wedding blessing no one needed to witness. Lila giggled from her stroller, as if she understood this was the start of something sacred. Nathan rose and wrapped Evelyn gently in his arms, as if afraid to break the dream. "I promise," he whispered, "no matter how the world changes, you'll never face it alone again." And Evelyn, the woman who had once given birth in loneliness, who had fallen beneath betrayal, leaned into him and murmured, "I don't need saving, but I choose to walk with you." Above them, branches trembled in the wind, petals fell, light danced across the lake. A new chapter of her life had begun. Dr. Timothy Rooney and Evelyn Hart's engagement spread quickly across the city. The press called it a modern fairy tale. On the New York Daily's front page was a photo of them under the cherry blossoms, Lila cradled between them. The headline read, "The woman once betrayed by a billionaire becomes a symbol of strength and genuine love." The world knew her name now, but Evelyn didn't care. She was too busy mixing formula, changing diapers, and making breakfast for the man who rose early every morning to brew her coffee. One evening, after Lila had fallen asleep, they sat together on the balcony. Below them, the city lights shimmered like a ribbon of gold. "Do you ever get scared?" she asked, "knowing everyone's watching us?" "No," he said. "I just worry you might feel lost in all the light." She shook her head, resting against his shoulder. "No, the light I need is right here." He smiled softly. "When I first met you, You said the hardest part of healing was learning to trust in kindness again. I think you've done it. Evelyn nodded. And you? What did you learn from me? That sometimes, he said, the one who saves others is the one who needed saving most. They chuckled together. In the small apartment that had once been a shelter for two, there was now warmth, laughter, and the scent of lavender. Elsewhere in the city, Logan Pierce sat alone, the newspaper crumpled in his hands. The photo of Evelyn smiling, truly smiling, stared back at him. There was no anger in his eyes now, only emptiness. He set the paper down, poured a glass of wine, and whispered hoarsely, "Congratulations, Evelyn. At least one of us finally learned how to love." Outside, spring had come to New York, but for Logan, winter hadn't ended. For Evelyn, those cherry blossoms weren't just the season's bloom. They were the first spring of her life. June morning, New York shimmered in golden light. From Fifth Avenue, the bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral rang through the air, clear, steady, like a promise of beginnings. Today was Evelyn Hart's and Dr. Timothy Rooney's wedding day. The city seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Journalists, friends, colleagues, everyone wanted to witness the woman who had once walked through hell step into her own heaven. The church was dressed in white chrysanthemums and lavender, pure yet straightforward. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, scattering colors across the stone floor like ribbons of grace. Evelyn stood in the bridal room, wearing a gown light as mist. Emily fastened her veil, her eyes wet. "I've never seen you this beautiful," she whispered. Evelyn smiled softly. "I'm not afraid anymore. Because you have him? Because I have myself." The door opened. Helen Grant entered, carrying a bouquet of lavender. "Ready? Street Jude's most radiant bride." Evelyn took the bouquet and drew a slow, steady breath. "I am." Outside, Nathan stood at the altar, wearing a pale grey tuxedo. His face was calm, but his eyes glowed. When the first notes of Canon in D filled the church, he lifted his head, and there she was, walking toward him through a shaft of light descending from the vaulted ceiling. The guests rose. The music faded. At that moment, Nathan Cole knew that if angels existed, they would look like the woman walking toward him. For Evelyn, each step was a memory meeting Nathan for the first time at Street. Jude, the day he brought her a pot of lavender, the night he held her hand in the middle of a snowstorm. And she remembered Logan, the man who once taught her what loss was, so that she could learn the worth of freedom. Halfway down the aisle, she stopped. At the last pew sat Logan Pierce. He wore a black suit, thinner now, his expression subdued. He hadn't been invited or announced his coming, yet he was there. Evelyn met his eyes. For an instant, the years rewound, the penthouse, the nights of waiting, the promises that dissolved like smoke. But her heart no longer trembled. It only felt gratitude. She smiled faintly and nodded, and Logan, the man who had once bowed to no one, lowered his head in acknowledgement. In that silent exchange, the two people who had hurt each other most forgave without a single word. The ceremony began. Nathan spoke his vows, his voice low and sure. "I vow to love you not only in joy, but in the rain. Be your friend, partner, and believer until time forgets to count." Evelyn's tears glistened as she smiled. "I vow to love you with the heart of someone who has known loss and therefore knows how to cherish. I vow to build with you a life full of light, where Lila will grow without ever fearing the dark." Applause rose through the church. Helen dabbed her eyes. Emily squeezed her husband's hand, smiling through tears. At the back, Logan sat motionless. He whispered under his breath, "That's the smile she was meant to have." Logan quietly stood and slipped out when the music swelled for the final blessing. The sunlight outside was too bright. Halfway down the steps, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Logan." He turned. Evelyn stood there in her wedding dress, no tears, only calm. "You really came," she said. "I didn't expect that." "I had to," he answered, his voice rough. "Because if I didn't, I'd never let go." "Thank you for coming," she said gently. "And thank you for having loved me in your own way." He looked at her, eyes heavy with words he no longer had the right to say. "I'm sorry, Evelyn." She shook her head. "You don't need to be. I forgave you long ago. Otherwise, I could never have loved anyone again. He was silent, then murmured, I read the article about you. They called you a symbol of resilience. They were right. You made me believe there's a kind of happiness money can't buy. And you, she said softly, made me believe pain can become grace. Without you, I wouldn't have Lila, or today. A breeze drifted past, scattering lavender petals from her bouquet. Evelyn looked at him one last time. Goodbye, Logan. He nodded, steady. Be happy, I already am. She turned and walked back toward the church steps, where Nathan waited, hand outstretched. Logan watched her go, didn't follow, didn't call out. He lifted his gaze to the sky when the doors closed behind her. White clouds drifted across a blue too wide to hold regret. And for the first time, he understood. She had truly stepped out of the dark, and maybe, just maybe, he could too. That afternoon, Logan Pierce left New York. He sold his shares of Pierce Group, withdrew from finance, and disappeared from the public eye. Some said he opened a cafe in Italy. Others claimed he worked with charities in Africa. But for Evelyn, he faded like an old dream, sad but necessary, part of a life that had finally come full circle. That night, Nathan raised his glass at the small wedding reception in Brooklyn Heights. To the past for teaching us the value of the present. Evelyn smiled, clinking her glass with his. And to the future where there's only light. Outside, fairy lights shimmered across the balcony. Laughter filled the little apartment, the same place where her journey had once begun. On the table, a single lavender petal drifted down. Evelyn placed it gently between the pages of a new journal and wrote the first line of her latest chapter. I have loved, lost, hurt, and forgiven. And at last I have truly lived. 20 years later, autumn came late that year in Brooklyn. The leaves were only beginning to turn gold, and sunlight still lingered on the old brick streets. In a small house with a balcony overlooking the park, Evelyn Rooney sat by the window, a cup of lavender tea steaming in her hands. Her hair now carried threads of silver, but her eyes were the same, deep, warm, and gentle. On the table lay a photograph. Evelyn, Nathan, and Lila, no longer a child but a young woman. The picture was taken on the day Lila graduated from Columbia University's nursing program, following her mother's path. In it, she wore her white coat and a radiant smile. Nathan walked in, the smell of fresh apple pie following him. Looking at that picture again, Evelyn turned, smiling. Not just looking. I still can't believe she's grown so fast. Well, so have you, he teased. Only difference is you've used less hair dye. She laughed, setting her cup down. You're still the same, always knowing how to make things lighter. Nathan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Together, they looked out at the park below. The trees had turned amber, children were tossing leaves into the air, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang softly. Remember, he said, we met at Street Jude this season. Of course, she smiled. Back then, I didn't think I'd ever laugh again. I thought my story was over, but you've written 10 more chapters since then. No, she said gently. We have. They fell quiet, watching the sky fade toward dusk. Then Evelyn's voice softened. Did I ever tell you about the night Lila was born? Not really, he said. You only said it was a night you could never forget. Evelyn nodded. That was the night I learned the most important thing, that strength isn't about not crying. It's about crying and still moving forward. I think everything we go through is practice for gratitude. Nathan squeezed her hand. I know. I've always believed God sent you to teach me that. Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, her gaze far away. On the table lay her old journal, its pages yellowed with time. The first page still held the words she'd written so long ago. I have loved, lost, hurt, and forgiven. And at last, I have lived. She turned to a new page, picked up her pen, and added, and now, I live to see that love continue through my daughter and the man sitting beside me each evening. That afternoon, the front door burst open. Now grown and graceful, Lila stepped inside, her brown hair fluttering in the calm wind. Mom, she called out, her voice bright as the season. I got the letter. They accepted me into the public health program in Seattle. Evelyn rose, pulling her daughter into her arms. Really? My little girl's flying to the other side of the country? Just for a few years, Lila grinned. I want to help kids there. You told me once healing isn't just a profession, it's a way of living. Evelyn's chest swelled with pride and tenderness. She realized every lonely road she had once walked had led to this moment, standing before the living proof of everything she had ever believed in. Faith, patience, love. That evening, the three of them shared dinner. The clink of forks and the scent of apple pie filled the house. Lila talked about her plans. Nathan listened, smiling. Evelyn said little, she only watched them, feeling that indescribable fullness when life finally comes full circle. When Lila went to bed, Evelyn stepped out onto the balcony. Moonlight pooled across the trees. Nathan followed, draping a shawl over her shoulders. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "About time," she said softly. "It doesn't take everything away, like I once feared. It just keeps what's worth keeping." Nathan said nothing, only took her hand. "I remember you once told me," he said, "love doesn't have to be perfect, just real. I think that's why we're still here." Evelyn smiled and leaned into him. In that moment, Evelyn Hart, the woman who had once given birth in solitude and stood at the edge of heartbreak, finally understood. True love doesn't come from a perfect beginning, but from two people who choose not to walk away in the hardest chapters. The night sky shimmered with quiet stars. Evelyn whispered, "Tomorrow, she leaves. The house will be quiet again." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Then we'll start a new chapter." She laughed softly. "What chapter?" "Two old souls and a pot of lavender." Evelyn laughed through the tears glinting in her eyes. "Sounds like a beautiful ending." "It's not an ending," Nathan said. "Just an interlude in the song." Below the balcony, a breeze stirred, setting the lavender blooms trembling. Moonlight touched the teacup, the wedding bands, the faces of two people who had once walked through darkness to find each other again. And somewhere in the quiet Brooklyn night, an old lullaby seemed to return, gentle as breath. "Don't be afraid, my child. Every wound will one day turn to light." Evelyn closed her journal, rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, and smiled at the sky filled with stars. Her story had come to a close, but the light of love, forgiveness, and quiet human grace continued, silently spreading, illuminating every soul that had ever been lost.